Hey guys, Evan Cole here, and today we're going to be talking about logging messages from .NET to AWS CloudWatch. AWS CloudWatch is an AWS service that's used for monitoring, and we're going to be using the ingesting logs function today. By default, most AWS services do log messages to AWS CloudWatch, and this is convenient because it means when you're using a service in AWS and you want to see what's happening, you can go to AWS CloudWatch and you can find the logs. And this applies to Lambda functions and a vast majority of the AWS services. But sometimes you might want to log to AWS CloudWatch from somewhere else. In this case, a .NET application. That .NET application could be hosted on an EC2 instance, or it might not even be in the AWS cloud. And that's fine. In this video, we're going to look at how we can log messages to AWS CloudWatch in .NET. We're going to be using the AWS SDK to get a low-level, first principles understanding of how it's done, before having a look at logging to AWS CloudWatch using some more popular logging libraries such as Serilog and Nlog. Some prerequisites for this video: you're going to need an AWS account, obviously. If you haven't signed up for one, you can sign up for one using the link below. And then I've also set up an AWS profile on my machine. And this just makes credentials and permissions a bit easier while we're doing development. In order to do that, you're going to have to install the AWS CLI and then configure your AWS profile there. Once that's done, we'll be able to follow with our demonstrations and not have to worry about credentials or permissions or anything at the moment. All right, so with all of that out the way, let's get started. We're going to be creating a new .NET 6 console application. I'm going to call it AWS CloudWatch Logging with AWS SDK. It's going to be a .NET 6, and let's go and create that. All right, so I'd finished creating. The first thing we're going to want to do is we want to add the AWS SDK NuGet package. So to do that, we're going to go to our Manage NuGet Packages, go to Browse, and we're just going to search AWS SDK. All right, and I just realized let's do one word because it might be a bit more clear. All right, and we're going to look for the AWS SDK.CloudWatch logs, this one over here with 12.9 million downloads at the moment. I'm going to be installing version 3.7.2, so we can just install that. Yep, that's good. Okay, cool. Looks like it did its thing. Great. So now that we've installed the AWS SDK NuGet package, we're going to be creating a logging class called AWS, or let's call it CloudWatch Logger. And that's just going to encapsulate our logic and keep it out of our application code. And so we're going to create a new class here. Just go add class. And we're just going to call it CloudWatch Logger. All right. Cool. So now we have our logger. Let's just do some .NET 6 magic. Clean it up. All right. I'm just going to make this public. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a constructor. Now, with this CloudWatch Logger, we're going to want to construct it asynchronously because when we're using the AWS SDK, all the methods that we call are asynchronous. And so there are different approaches that you can take, and this is what you'll often see in other logging libraries. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to set up our AWS CloudWatch logs in the constructor. So to do an asynchronous constructor, we're going to use a factory-like method. So we're going to have a private constructor, and right now it's not going to have anything yet. And then we're going to create a public static method. And there we go, static, yeah, CloudWatch Logger, and we're just going to call it get logger async. All right, and so here we're just going to create a new logger instance like that. Here we're going to do some setup async, and then we're just going to return that logger once we've done all our setup. So right now we don't have any asynchronous setup, but we're ready to do it. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create an instance of the Amazon CloudWatch Logs client and store it in a field on our class. So I'm first going to create a private field, and I'm going to make it a type Amazon CloudWatch Logs, like that. All right, and you can just import that using there, and we're just going to call it _client. And then in our private constructor, we're going to assign a new instance of the Amazon CloudWatch Logs client over there, like that. All right, so now we have a CloudWatch client. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start setting up AWS CloudWatch. So the first thing we have to do is create a log group. So in AWS CloudWatch, logs are broken down into log groups. And each log group belongs to an application, basically. And so to do that, we're going to have to do it asynchronously. But first, we want to get the name that we want to use for our log group. And we're going to make it a parameter in our constructor. Except we're going to pass it in here in our getLoggerAsync function. So here we're going to add a log group parameter. And we're going to add a parameter to our constructor like that. And we're just going to pass it in like that. And then we're going to create a private field that stores our log group. And we're going to assign that in our constructor like that. Great. So now we know, we have a parameter for the log group. So when we create a new instance of our client or our logger, we can then go and now create a log group for it. And so I'm going to do that in a private asynchronous method. I'm going to return anything. We're just going to call it create log group async. And this is going to use the client to create a log group. And so to do that, we're going to, it returns a type, but we're not going to use it. So we're just going to use underscore equals await underscore client dot create log group. And you'll see here, it takes a create log group request object. So let's do that now. Request. All right, and let's see what we can provide. So there's a few options. The only one that's required is the log group name, which is what we're going to be passing in. And that's going to be what we passed in as a parameter log group earlier over here. So we're just going to create a new log group in AWS CloudWatch with the name that we passed in earlier. And that's it. And now we can call this method over here in our getLoggerAsync function by doing logger.create log group async. And let's just await this like that. All right. And that, oh wait, let's static async. Ooh, mistakes. Task. There we go. All right, that looks a little better. Cool. So let's give this a test run and see what happens. So I'm going to move over to our program.cs, and we're just going to create a new logger, and we're going to use that static method. And so CloudWatch logger and dot get logger async. Let's just await this, and let's pass in a name. In this case, I'm going to pass in a name of /.net /logging demo /AWS SDK. And that's generally how log groups are named in AWS CloudWatch, is using the /, and you get more particular or specific as you go. All right, so let's run this and see what happens. All right. Okay, here we go. So it's run, or it's running. It's running. Let's see what happens. Ooh. Let me quickly set. I realize I have multiple AWS profiles set up. So I'm just going to quickly set it up on the one that I'm logged into currently. So to do that, we're just going to set an AWS environment profile for our debug. And we're going to set it to that. All right, let's run it again and see what happens. All right, cool. And now if we go to AWS CloudWatch and I refresh, you'll see it's created a new log group. Now inside the log group, we have nothing, but we're getting there. Now I want to show you one thing before we move on. I'm going to run this application again, and I want you to see what happens. It's going to run, but we are going to get an exception because that log group already exists. And so what we need to do is we need to add some sort of check to make sure that we don't try and create a log group again if it already exists. So if we go back to our CloudWatch logger over here, and we just go to this create log group, I'm going to do maybe it's a bit naive, but it will work. We are going to do a query to get all the existing log groups. So we're going to do bar existing log groups equals a wait underscore client dot describe log group. Woo! Log groups. And then we're going to check the list of log groups that are returned and check if there's any log group that has the same name as what we've specified in our constructor, like that. And if there is one, we're just going to return. We're not going to bother trying to create a log group. We're just going to return this method. And now if we run this again, you'll see it won't throw an exception because it will see that the log group's already been created and it's just going to skip. All right, and it ran. Cool. So no issues. It's created a log group. All right, so the next thing we have to do is we have to create a log stream. And so after you've created a log group in AWS CloudWatch, which would belong to like an application, you'd create a log stream. And a log stream is like a single run of that application. Or it could be an HTTP request if your application is serving HTTP requests. So your log stream is basically a single execution of your program. So in this case, we're going to associate an instance of this CloudWatch logger to a log stream. And so we're also going to create a log stream then in the constructor. In this case, we're going to generate the name of the log stream, so we don't need to ask for it in the constructor. But I am going to store it in a private field, and you'll see why. So let's create a private string field for log stream. And then let's create another method here, asynchronous, create log stream async. And that returns a task. Cool, so the first thing we want to do is let's create a name for our log stream. So in this case, we're going to call it date time. We're going to use the current date time. And I'm actually just going to do it like this. Datetime.utc now. And we're going to format it like that. And then I'm going to just add a GUID to the end. Just make sure it's unique. And this is similar to how AWS CloudWatch actually names their log streams by default. So once we've created a name, we can now go and create a log stream using the client. So we're going to say underscore client.create log stream async. And that's going to be a new create log stream request object. And in here, we are going to specify the log group name that the stream should be created on. And that's that original, we're using that log group field, underscore log group, that we set in our constructor. And then we need to set the name of the stream that we would like to create. And that's going to be underscore log stream. So once we've done that, I'm not going to do anything with the response object. So I'm just going to do that. Let's go and call this create log stream method here in our constructor. And let's see what happens when we run this. So I'm going to run this. All right, let's see. All right, so it's run. Everything's happy. Let's check what happened in CloudWatch. All right, so if I've opened up the log group, and you'll see here we have a log stream now, and this was created by our application. So it's currently empty. There's no messages in here, but we one step closer. All right, so now that we've created our log stream, we need to start putting messages into that log stream. So we are going to create in our CloudWatch logger, I'm going to create a public async method, and it's going to be called log message async. and it's going to take a message to log as a parameter. All right, very simple, but it works for this demonstration. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to use the client, and we are going to say put log events async, and then a new put log events request. In this request object, we are going to specify the log group name, which we have in that private field, like that. The log stream, which we also have in the field, like that. And then we're going to specify log events. And this is a list. Now, it's a list because what you should be doing is you should be batching log messages and then sending them to CloudWatch. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to send every log message we get. Now, in a real production application, you might run into you might reach your threshold for maximum requests per second. But because this is a demo, we're not too worried about that. And when we use one of the more popular logging libraries like Serilog or Nlog, you will see that they do cater for that. All right, so we're just going to create a new input log event. We're going to make the message our message parameter. And then we have to provide a timestamp, and I'm just going to use the datetime.utc now as the timestamp. All right, and that should log a message to our log stream. Let's test it. So I'm going to say logger.log message, hello world, and this should be awaited. And then let's log a second message. I am another message. And let's run this and see what happens. All right. So we've run it. Okay. So it's run. Let's see what happens in CloudWatch. All right. So I have our log group open. I'm going to open our log stream. You'll see it's logged, but it's only logged our first message. And that's a bit strange. Let's see what's happening. Ooh, we're not awaiting this. Let's await that. That is a mistake. And try again. All right, that's a bit more promising. Now you'll see our first message is logged fine, but when it gets to the second one, it says there's an invalid sequence token exception. And it's expecting this long string as a sequence token. All right, so let's take a look at what's happening. Basically, every time we send log events to a log stream, we have to specify a sequence token, except when there are no log messages in that log stream. So when we logged our first message to an empty log stream, it was fine. But when we tried logging a second message, because there was already a message there, it expected a next sequence token. Where do we get that? Well, let's take a look. When we call put log events async, it returns a put log events response object. And if we go look at that response object, you'll see that we have a next sequence token property there. And that contains that long number that we have to provide the next time we log a message. So we want to store this somewhere. So we're going to create a field here, private string underscore next sequence token. I'm just going to initialize it to null. And the reason I'm doing that is because we don't actually have a sequence token when we first create a log stream. Where were we? Here we go. So we're going to just assign that next sequence token with the next sequence token that's returned when we log a message. Then we want to provide that sequence token when we log our next message. So what's going to happen is we're going to log our first message. Next sequence token is null, but that's fine because our log stream is always going to be empty when we log our first message. After that, we're going to assign the next sequence token from that response to our private field, and then we're going to provide that token the next time we log a message. So let's save that and run it and see what happens now. All right. And it's running. All right, and no exceptions. So let's see what happened. Cool. So here in CloudWatch, see here we have the latest log stream. And here you can see it's logged both messages. So it used that next sequence token to log the second message to AWS CloudWatch. Cool, so that's all for this first video on logging.NET to AWS CloudWatch. The goal of this video was just to give you a first principles hands-on demonstration of how we use AWS CloudWatch or the AWS SDK to log to AWS CloudWatch. It's a very simplified demonstration, but it paves the way for understanding how existing logging libraries implement this functionality. And so in the next videos, we're going to be focusing on how we can use Serilog and Nlog to log to AWS CloudWatch.